Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Your eyes don't deceive you, this is another Drydock video, but today we are filming inside the reference library on the battleship. I know it's been a while since we've done a video that wasn't of the exterior hull of the ship, but today we've got another video about the caulk on the ship and how we found out what it was and why it was there. And the answer is gosh darn curating. The good old-fashioned curating work that we've been doing for years to get the ship ready for dry docking. A critical first step in this project was to get a hold of some of the collections that the museum has, and my coworkers, primarily, to a smaller extent myself, have been working on organizing the reference library and a number of other collections on the ship. The reference library is the space where many of our primary documents are. These are things like archival documents, like these I have here, as well as the books, technical publications, things like that related to the ship. The gunnery manuals, the engineering stuff, the daily checks that they made, all of that sort of stuff comes into this room. It had previously been scattered all over the ship. By the time we started our work in the curatorial department here, the stuff had mostly been removed from its original context. I'm not entirely sure if that was some of the curators that preceded me pulling it out of the spaces where it would have originally been, or if the Navy started to pull it out of those spaces and consolidate it for future use. However, we pretty early on consolidated into a space. That space was understandably a mess, and then we started to organize it so that all the engineering stuff went on a shelf, and all the gunnery stuff went on a shelf, and all the damage control stuff went on a shelf, and so on and so forth, so that we could at least go through this pile of stuff and figure out what we had. Now, the next main step is to catalog it all so that we know exactly what manuals we have, and it's in a list, so that if somebody asks, hey, I'm looking for a manual on 16-inch guns, we don't have to come in here and look at the several shelves of 16-inch gun manuals. We can go to the list and be like, oh, there it is. And that is a work in progress. Special thanks to Owen for putting in the hours of work that have gotten us to where we are right now. So that brings us to the enduring mystery of this dry dock. Why is there caulk on the riveted seams between the layers of paint? Obviously, if it's there, it's important. But what is it? And how much of an expense is it going to be to replace? Is it a simple caulk? Is it something like really high-end? Was it actually important enough to replace? These are all questions that the folks with the financial responsibility of the battleship have to ask themselves. This was not one of the things originally spec'd out in this project, and while we did keep something like 10 or 15% of the project cost in reserve because we knew we were going to find stuff we didn't expect. But is it important enough to spend that money on this project instead of whatever we might find in the next month in dry dock? So we went through the shelf that was in activation stuff. And when I say a shelf, I don't mean like a shelf. I mean like a shelf, to try and find some documents that explain that. Because like I've said in the past, we have some documents that say what the paint spec was from 1990. And it did not include the caulk, which is between the layers of paint. So that must be part of the paint spec, right? Anyway, just like we have for a number of projects on this yard period, including the caulk, there were change orders that were created during this yard period. So we had the original paint spec, but we hadn't previously found this change order. And for those of you who are like, oh, you've got all of this stuff, how did you not know this ahead of time? There are hundreds of thousands of documents here in the museum, and I've only worked here for 6 years. I haven't gotten to read 1% of them yet. There is so much more to learn about this ship than we already know. And it's projects like these that force us to learn that information, to go through and research it. So this specifically references, this is from October of 1990 in Long Beach, and it's a document titled Void Inactivation. The ship had had a semi-persistent issue with water ending up in some of the void spaces and fuel tanks. And rather than finding out exactly what was leaking, it seems like they just spec'd out extending the yard period slightly and putting caulk on all the riveted seams. The assumption was made that those riveted seams were what were leaking. That's a fairly safe assumption. So there are actually two possibilities that could be contributing to that water intrusion. The one that was nominally treatable, the riveted seams, and water coming in through the deck, which was not treatable during that yard period. So they did what they were able to treat. If the riveted seams are leaking, obviously that could contribute to water in the voids. What I mean by the deck leaking, each tank has a J-shaped pipe that comes out of it along the bulkhead. And these J-shaped pipes are to allow air to escape from the tank as you're pumping fuel or water, whatever else into the tank, and that's rising. So rather than pressurize the air that's in there, it gives that air an escape. However, those pipes are just regular, I think they're Schedule 40, they might be Schedule 80, mild steel iron pipes, or just mild steel pipes. They're 80 years old, and the teak deck traps water up against them, so they are largely corroded. And as we've been replacing the deck, we've found dozens, if not hundreds of them that have been wasted away, either just small areas or entirely broken off from the deck because they've completely wasted through. So that could be the rainwater intrusion problem. Now we've been fixing that, so that could be how water's getting in the tanks as well. We've been fixing that as we've been replacing the decks around it. But, much like the Navy, we don't have the ability to go through all of the riveted seams. Again, it's something like 18,000 linear feet of riveted seams to find out where and if there are leaks. So, now we know why the Navy caulked those. The next question is, what did they use? Fortunately, the government does document everything if you can find the document in this mess. So it specifically references that the repair work will be done according to NSTM Chapter 631. That is Naval Ships Technical Manual. There are dozens and dozens of chapters in the Naval Ships Technical Manual. Here, I have my favorite chapter of the Naval Ships Technical Manual, Chapter 50, which is Readiness and Care of Inactive Ships. And it gives you an idea of the size of one of these chapters. I do not have a copy of 631 in print. However, if you go online, you can look up copies of 631. The first copy that we looked up, there's a PDF of it available, and scrolled down to the riveted section, and it said, section removed because there weren't any riveted ships in service anymore. Now, fortunately, continuing to scour the internet, we were able to find an older edition of that chapter from the late 80s or early 90s that still had the riveted section, and it lists two different components that could be used. Now, we knew from previous research that it was a two-part polysulfide caulk that had been used, and so we had been speccing out those materials when we picked one that we thought was going to work. And there was still some hesitation on our part because this is a six-figure repair job, and is this the right material? Well, the one we picked was one of the two that was listed in Chapter 631 as what was used. So there's better than a 50% chance that that is the actual product that came off of the hull. So that certainly makes us feel much better about reapplying this product. So this has just been one example of how the curatorial work, the research that we have to do around the ship has been critical to dry docking the ship, and why we couldn't have dry docked the ship 5 years ago successfully, because we had to know what we had and where it was to be able to do the research we needed to make informed decisions towards the repairs so that they will last for 30 years like we need them to. Even knowing that the documents that we needed were on might have been on a specific shelf in this room, it still took us weeks between doing the actual dry docking work and doing research in our free time to be able to find the information we needed to do this job. It would have been completely impossible if we were running around the ship trying to find original documents as they had been scattered. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below for more ways you can support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, subscribing so more people find about the channel and the ship. Thanks for watching.